Her eyes, almost turquoise in color, were locked onto him, her sometimes unsettling gaze boring clean through him. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice sweet but a little aloof. "Nothing. Sorry. I was just venting," he said, and flashed her a reassuring smile. He reached into his dark gray coat and pulled out another beer can. It popped open with a satisfying pop, and he took a sip. Then, in a well-practiced salute, he raised it toward the holocast in the sky. "Same old story, sis." "Do you think we'll make any progress this time?" Sarah asked. He snorted and took a drink of beer, partially to help feed his buzz, but also to prevent him from saying something he'd regret. The Constellation Games, the infamous tournament, had only just started, and yet the men and women representing Earth weren't faring well. Hell, that had been the trend since the start. In 10 years, his people hadn't climbed up a single rung on the competition ladder. Humans were considered bottom dwellers, and with every loss, their species' future went from bad to grim to dire. Clint's stomach twisted on itself as the second contestant died a horrible death on screen, their body torn into 3 separate pieces by his opponents. A wave of hushed curses and angry breaths reverberated throughout the crowd. Sarah grabbed onto Clint's arm and squeezed as she watched. He hated that she had to be there, but they were forced to watch. She was his little sister, someone he was supposed to protect. But here she was. It was common knowledge that the Karmish, amongst other servant races, were brutal beyond comprehension. But he understood why. The overlords brought harrowing tales of bottom-dwelling civilizations that were enslaved and turned into zoos, or simply erased from the star charts. Those worlds had been given the privilege of competing in the games. Clint reached up and ran a hand over his short-cropped black hair, discovering that it was slick with sweat. Despite the cool air, he was starting to perspire through his white shirt, too. He'd spilled beer on himself as well. He wasn't drunk, well, that drunk, but he was nervous as hell, and for good reason. There were the occasional cheers when the third fighter scored a successful hit, but a deep, intense silence flooded in again right after. No one screamed or cried out when the third fighter fell to a bloody and brutal fatality. They simply didn't have the emotional energy anymore, so they all turned to the last fighter standing, Huey. Huey the Perkinator Perkins was the last man standing. He'd spent 6 years on Hadran, fighting to get stronger. He'd been one of the few that did it for all of humankind, and that's why people adored him. Clint looked up to the symbiote-encased Lancer. Hell, he idolized him. Back on Earth, the Perkinator had been a security guard grinding in a 9-to-5 job, just like him. Now he was a legend, a god among men. Despite all that, his accomplishments, his gained strength, intelligence, and speed, he was nothing more than prey to the Artanians, the tournament favorites. Clint locked in on the holocast, watching Huey's every move. Earth's champion charged in, swinging his spear over his head in dramatic fashion, and brought it down on his opponent. The Artanian Blademancer parried the blow, his laser-edged sword deflecting Huey's spear out wide. The Perkinator recovered, dodged a skewering counterattack, and darted in again, closing the distance with the Blademancer in a flash. His Aurelian spear reared back, poised for a lunge that would likely puncture the 3-legged alien's blue symbiotic armor. Artanians were big, gray-skinned bastards, almost twice the size of the average human, but their size was deceiving. The heavier gravity of their home planet conditioned their body and reflexes, but when combined with the symbiote's biomodifications, they became something capable of moving far quicker than seemed reasonable. Huey unleashed a flurry of stabs at his opponent's side. The spear tip struck and glanced off, failing to penetrate.